Hi, my name is Elizabeth Timefuk, and I graduated in December 1999. And so it's such a privilege here to be with Dr. Michael Brown, who is the president of the Bible School. And I'm just so excited to be here with you. Just to sit back and think about all the days. I mean, it seems like just a little while ago, but that was what, 20 years ago.
Over 20 years ago.
I'm trying to hold on, Dr. Brown. So we're here with you here in Charlotte, and we're talking about the reunion that's coming up. Daniel Kalinda, Christ for All Nations, is hosting it, and we said, what does it look like to have a family reunion? So we're calling it a family reunion. And so you started the family. You're like the patriarch of the family for the Bible School. And so when God put that in your heart, when He started to speak to you about the school, because every move of God has things that God asked those leaders to do. When God came to you and really spoke about the Bible school, how was that birthed in your heart?
The very first time I was in Brownsville, God called me to be part of the leadership team that very first week. And for years, my heart, along with Steve Hill's heart, had been beating for revival. We knew each other through Leonard Ravenhill. We had been praying, crying out, fasting for revival. I wrote a book, From Holy Laughter to Holy Fire. It came out 3 months before revival broke in Pensacola, and the last 3 words of the book were, "Are you ready?" I knew something was at the door. 3 months later, revival breaks in Pensacola. Steve Hill and I make contact. He invites me down. It takes months before I can get down. I finally get down in May of '96, and immediately God began to speak to me about equipping and training. When I was flying back from my first week there, God dropped several E's in my heart. One was to entrench. The revival needed to go even deeper. Another was expand. We need more workers. We need more facilities. The next was equip. We need to raise up laborers for the harvest. And then export. Send the fire around the world. So immediately, I wrote to Pastor Kilpatrick. In fact, it was right before everyone was using emails. I remember I faxed the church and said, hey, the Lord laid this on my heart as I was leaving. And then a couple weeks later, so it's Father's Day now of '96, so 1 year after the beginning of the revival, God speaks to me clearly, raise up a ministry school. And here's what's interesting. I wrote to the brothers there. I shared the vision. I didn't get an immediate response. Around August, Steve turned to me in one of the meetings and said, Mike, we've got to have a school here. I said, hey, bro, I told you 2 months ago. So we began to talk about it, but this was the interesting thing. I had a vision for it. I saw the importance of it. I knew that revival is going to radically change lives, but now we want to see long-term fruit. That's all we ever cared about. Steve used to say the true test of an evangelist ministry is 5 or 10 years down the line. We love the excitement of the moment, the intensity and the passion of the moment, but what about long-term fruit? But this was my struggle. I thought, wait a second. I've led schools before. I know the responsibility. This is the midst of revival now. We're going day and night. Plus, I'm still writing. Plus, I'm still traveling. How could we possibly do it? So I talked to the other leaders, and they said, Mike, if you lead the school, if you put together the curriculum, the faculty, we'll hire the administrative people. We'll work on the finances to work with you to offload that. We'll get the pastoral people to care for the students. I said, okay, great. That I can handle. Once the school started, God began to do something in my heart. We started with 120 full-time students in January of 1997.
What a great number, 120.
Yeah, perfect number, 120, all right? Then that summer, because it started in January, that summer, we started to get flooded with applications. I mean, they were pouring in. We went from 120 to 600. 1 year later, we had more than 1,000 full-time students. 2 years after that, we had grads serving in 20 nations. It just exploded. But that summer, God began to supernaturally join my heart to the heart of the students. That became the all-consuming burden, this relationship with them, that they were part of the family, and that I had the responsibility of a spiritual dad in their lives. And the other faculty felt this. Our hearts were supernaturally joined, and there was a period of several years, literally, I could not say the word students or talk about the school without breaking down crying. I'd be at a pastor's meeting in a city with hundreds of leaders, and they've come together to hear what's happening in revival and be ministered to. And after preaching and praying, we'd do Q&A. And they'd say, Dr. Brown, how are things at the school? And I'd just break down crying. I couldn't even talk because my heart was so deeply knit with the students. So we've kept that relationship. It's been wonderful to see spiritual sons and daughters like Dan Kalenda, like Ward Simpson, who's the president and CEO of God TV, like others who are in the Middle East and countries we can't even mention, like others who are amazing homeschooling moms and others planting churches, just people living out the values that were so precious. There they are, it's happening. I went to the Philippines a couple years ago where our team, men, women, and children, is over 50 people there. Wow. And of course, we have a fire school of ministry there in the Philippines. And the student body came up to me and they said, "Hello, grandfather." They said, "You are the father of our spiritual fathers." But that's what it's all been about, spiritual reproduction.
Well, you said there's fire school ministry. Is that the only place that you guys have, or do you have in different nations?
No, we have a full-time school in the Philippines. We have a full-time school in Holland. We have a full-time school in Italy, in Catania. We have a full-time school in Cameroon, in Africa, and a part-time school in Cameroon with potential for more. And now we're taking our entire program and making it fully online with the very same classes, the exact same classes you sat in, with the exact same faculty. Those very classes, the audio with the study guides, and in some cases video, we're now bringing that all online so that we can serve the next generation more effectively.
You know, Dr. Brown, I was sitting like maybe 2 years ago with Brenda Kilpatrick having lunch, and she just started to talk about revival, of course, and she started talking about the students, and she was saying her and Pastor John, they said some of the greatest fruit of revival was the Bible school that came out of it. And so what do you feel about that?
Yeah, first it's the wisdom of God. God had the idea. God put it in our hearts. I remember talking to Pastor David Wilkerson just a few months into the beginning of the school. And he said, "Mike, that's the smartest thing you've ever done." He said, "Because the life of a revival is 4 or 5 years max." He said, "And after that, the lasting fruit's going to be the school." I thought, really? 4 or 5 years max? Which ended up being, in terms of the height of the revival, basically the length of it. It's gone on in many lives. It continues to this day in other ways. But he was absolutely right. So we knew the Jesus principle. You get with key people, and you pour into them for an intensive period of years, and they go out and reproduce. So it's the wisdom of God, it's the grace of God, but everyone has their part. Without Pastor Kilpatrick and the burden he had, and the praying for revival, and the anointing he had to host the revival, we never would have gotten to the point of having a school. So we so honored the foundations that he and Brenda laid because it's sacrificial. To host revival is sacrificial.
It is. So you're, in your heart, all these years you're a revivalist, and there was so much imparted to you, but also like you really wrote a lot of books on revival and a move of God, because those were the things, all your extra classes, I would go to all of those, like the things you did at the church, all of those things. So like, how has revival impacted you? Just because those are like landmarks in your life, but even 20 years later, how is it still impacting you?
There are a few things. One is the Brownsville Revival confirmed what I had always known, that if we'll really hunger for God, if we'll preach Jesus, if we'll open our hearts to the Holy Spirit, if we'll live holy lives and preach against sin and offer new hope and new life through the resurrection, people will come. Lives will be changed. We don't need to do it according to the traditional human formulas. And the fact of the matter is, flesh can only birth flesh. Wow. Our greatest church planting, church growth efforts can only reproduce after themselves. But Leonard Ravenhill always used to say, you don't have to advertise a fire. So when the fire falls, people will come. Now, I understand you can't have normal church life, church growth with people lining up outside of your building 12 hours in advance of services, and that's not going to be the normal pattern. But this much I knew, Steve knew, we knew, that when you get on your faces and cry out for God to move, when he comes and moves, people will come. So that remains a value in my life to this day. We don't have to do it the way of the flesh. We don't have to go the way of the world. Yeah. You don't win the world by becoming like the world. You win the world by becoming like Jesus. Yeah. So that reinforced everything I had written before and laid a foundation for what I've written afterwards. And then in the midst of revival, you know what it was like when 50 kids from a local high school would get up and testify, and you'd think, maybe the whole school's going to be touched. Yeah. And Steve would say, one of these days, we're going to get a report that the Spirit fell in the hallways of the school or at the mall. And you knew it could happen because you saw a little bit here and a little bit there. So it remains a great vision of mine that we could still see a sweeping national revival. Yeah. As messed up as the country is, but God, words, but God, those always burn bright in me. And then a third thing is that in the midst of revival, dreaming our dreams, that's when God birthed in me the Jesus Revolution theme. Jesus radically changing us and us going and radically changing our world. So that has been a fundamental value of my life these last 20 years. Revival and revolution, the one tied in with the other, not earthly, worldly revolution, the way the flesh does it with violence and hatred, intimidation, no, but overcoming evil with good, overcoming hatred with love, overcoming the flesh with the Spirit. And I see all these people that share these values, these grads in particular, that carry these values around America in their personal lives and their business ethic and the way they raise their families, the way they plant churches around the world, the way they preach Jesus in difficult new areas. They're carrying the values of revolutionaries. We've left everything for the Jesus cause. Lord, use us to change the world.
Wow, I love that, and I just can feel the passion and hunger, and I think like one of the core things of always going after that's how being hungry for God, being hungry for, there's more, there's always more. And so I think like even for me, we were talking with some grads and I said, I'm still hungry. We've only tasted.
Yes.
Even revival was just a taste of what heaven's like. And so for us to see a whole culture change, to see our nation change, it's our responsibility. I mean, I don't know if I heard Keith Green said this, it could have been someone else, but it says every generation of ministers is responsible for that generation. Yeah. And I think, so many of us were touched in revival. I think there's a responsibility behind that. And so we owe the next generation a move of God. Yeah. They're lingering in things and we're the answer to it. And so what would you talk about, share with even the crads that are out there that have been through so much? I've been on phones, they've been through so many things, like just the principle of just staying hungry.
Yeah. First, I would say for many who've experienced disappointment, who thought things would work out a certain way and they didn't, that we all understand that every one of us has hit walls. Yeah. Every one of us has been disappointed. Every one of us has had people let us down. Yeah. But you cannot let that infect your heart. Yeah. I made a determination many, many years ago after I'd really been betrayed by someone close to me. I made a determination, if I get stabbed, it's going to be in the back, because I'm going to still trust people and I'm still going to love people. If I start putting walls up and doing everything like a business, it's not ministry anymore. So for every grad that's been hurt and that's got their defenses up and that's disappointed and kind of burnt out and, I'm not going to get my hope up again, don't let the devil win. Yeah, don't let the world win. Don't let bad circumstances win. Put your hope in God afresh. That's the first thing. The second thing, what you experienced in Brownsville was real. It was not emotionalism. It was not just hype. It was not just a lot of talk and buzz and crowds. God was moving in the midst of it. In the midst of our human imperfection, God himself was moving. If he put a dream in your heart, go back to that dream. If he gave you a promise, go back to that promise. That hasn't changed. And even if you've messed up and disqualified yourself, by the mercy of God, you can be restored. And the best is still yet to come. And I tell them, listen, no matter what you're seeing, no matter how much success you're seeing, no matter how your church plant is doing, or how your family is doing, or how your business is doing, or how your evangelistic ministry is doing, there's more. Yeah. And Dr. Josh Peters, our missions director, made a statement similar to Keith Green's. He said, I don't know if this is the last generation, but it's our last generation.
That's good.
So I live with that sense of urgency because heaven and hell are real every day, because the devil is destroying lives every day, because Jesus is here to be glorified every day. And I've only got one life, one shot to make a difference. So go for it. Throw yourself back in again, but don't do it alone. For every grad that's hurting, there are 5 or 10 that are strong, that are doing well. Grab hold of others. Say, hey, I need some help. Let's run together. And soon enough, just like when a circle of grads sits and start talking about revival, within minutes, everyone's crying because you're remembering and you're... So encourage one another. Strengthen one another. Yeah, we know about the hardship, the difficulty. That's life. That's going to happen. We hurt with you. We stand with you. That's happening all the time. Grads that are struggling, grads that are hurting, families that are falling apart, divorces. We're right there because we care. It's not just a matter of producing ministry. We care about people. But get with some others. Get encouragement. Share testimony. Share the good news. And as you start to hear that, let hope and hunger arise again.
Well, Dr. Brown, we're talking, I love how you shared that, it brought to tears, you even talking about the students. That means that God was ingraining family in us. And the body of Christ is a family. Yeah. And so there was something to me that even like me being a student, that the people that were around me, we were in school all day together. Then we were in revival all night together. After years, it's like we were with each other more than our families almost, and so we became family, spiritual family. And so thinking about that, this is the BRSM Fire, family reunion. As a dad that birthed this and God used to really lead it, well, how would you just talk about in your heart? How do you feel like family when you see BRSM grads on the road or fire grads on the road? Even people that were there just for a year. How does that connect with you as like a papa?
Yeah, it's amazing because you feel that historic connection. If it's someone that was in the school when it was at the biggest, almost 1,200 full-time students, and I barely got to know them personally, there was still a sense of bond that we have. So I'll see them years later. I'm preaching in some area, and someone shows up, Dr. Brown, I was in the school, I pastor over here. Now it's like, whoa, great. So we just hang out. Just let's be together. Right?
It's a heart connect.
Yeah. The memories are there, the common heritage we have, what we experienced together, the fire that we experienced, the prayer, the travail, the vision. When I tell the students, look at me, I'm not dreaming. And now years later, we've seen what God's done and we've seen what's happened. And some of it exceeds even the things that we talked about. So I remember when Daniel was hired as Reinhard Bonnke's personal assistant, I said, man, do you know what an honor that is to be his PA? Who knew that he was going to take over the ministry and see the same signs and wonders and salvations that God was doing, to see them continue and see the way other grads have been used. So there's a family pride. There's that sense of joy. We experience this together. We're not dreaming. We know what it's like in a unique way, different than anyone else on the planet. We were in something very holy and special together. But it also means that when we see someone in life has not turned out that well, and that their dreams have been smashed, all the more do we want to say, hey, we're still in this together.
Yeah.
We're still family. We're not just family with the successful ones and the shining, charismatic ones. No, we're family with the ones hurting and the ones that have fallen on hard times and the ones whose dreams have been smashed. Let's just love on people. So when I see everyone coming together, I really believe there's going to be a fresh igniting of hope.
Yeah.
I really believe there's going to be a fresh igniting of vision. And for those that are hurting, I really believe it's going to be a time of healing, restoration, and leaving the bad of the past behind and taking the good of the past. Don't let the enemy rob.
Yeah, I love that. We actually had, I think it was maybe a month ago, we had some called Influencers Dinner, and we got the grads that were, whether they were fire grads or BRSM grads, we got them all together in Pensacola, met together, and everyone kind of came in on their own, but by the time they left, people were exchanging numbers. You could just sense there was like prayer. We had prayer during, but people were talking different things they went through. It was like a totally different room when everyone left, because there's something about connecting like hearts again, saying we love God, we love revival, and God made us a family. And so I do want to I want to ask you two things. One, like, what is maybe something memorable you remember from the school, like a moment that you remember from school that really impacted you, that you maybe it's like a go-to for you because it was so impactful to your heart? And maybe something lighthearted you can share that really, like, you can remember, like, that was a great, because in every family you have serious moments and you have lighthearted moments. So
yeah, well, one in terms of an intense moment, and there were so many.
Yeah.
But we would start the first week of a new semester with chapel every day. So it was almost like throwing kerosene in a massive burning fire already. Yeah. And this particular semester, we had students from 34 nations. And I wanted everyone to catch a burden for the nations. Yeah. So I said, all right, if you're from outside the U.S., I want you to line up, and you're going to lead in prayer for your nation. I said, even if you speak English fluently, I want you to pray in your native language, whatever that native language is. And I wanted that for two reasons. One, I wanted them to be able to fully pour out their heart from the depths. And two, I wanted us to hear all the different nations. Well, I remember the burden of the Lord hit people. They got up to pray, and they couldn't pray. They began to wail and scream. I remember the gals from Japan. They just began to wail and scream. They collapsed in a heap, interceding, and that burden just hit all of us. And so we always had a heart from the nation, a heart for the nations, a heart for souls from day one. But that was one of those moments for the nations that you just can't forget that. You know, lighthearted. Obviously, we didn't have a lot of social activities because we were so busy with revival and everything else in life. Yeah. But we'd have these volleyball tournaments. and we would do it once a semester, but we were so spiritual that we would still, every team represented a nation, and we would intercede for those nations before the game. So I would just trash talk. I'm in New York, and I'd try to intimidate the other team, and we'd have a student who was a ref. I'd try to intimidate the ref and get on them. But here's something interesting. It was the second semester when we did that, and some days after that, I got a letter from one of the gals who had been on my team, one of the young ladies who was a student. I don't even know if I knew her name, but she said, Dr. Brown, I grew up without a dad, and I basically never had a dad. And she said, playing volleyball with you that day, she said, for the first time in my life, I felt like I had a father.
Oh.
And that's when I began to understand the depth of what was happening in the spirit, the depth of fatherlessness in this generation, and the depth of spiritual fathering that could be done to pour in. And I became much more intentional in my thinking and my praying and even my interacting because of that. But yeah, we would, even in the lighthearted moments, there was something spiritual that came out of it.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. Oh, some of us, because we did a Light the Fire tour in Pensacola, through Pensacola, and we drove by where we're showing the guys. And one of the first stories that we talked about when we drove in where the school was at is we talked about when Scott Brown backed up the cart, and he like the whole window blew out when he like reversed the golf cart. So that was kind of, I don't know why we remember those funny moments, but of course we had so many deep moments. Like, how could we not? I remember when Yesu Padam was there, and it was like I had like Katie on one side and Darcy on the other, and like the power of God, like we broke out in just intercession in there, and like they're weeping, I start weeping, and it's like God did so much in our hearts, serious, and then we just also enjoyed life together, so that's so amazing. So what we'd like to do is we want to invite, as you were the founding president, also you were here at Fire, so you're in both schools, so we want to maybe ask for you to really look into the camera and invite the students as a dad, as a papa, to, forever you're going to be in our hearts, as the leader that led us. Maybe looking to invite them to the reunion. It's September 3rd from 1 to 3. Or 1 to 4, excuse me. From 1 to 4, it'll be a Brownsville Assembly of God. So as just to come see you, come say hi to you, come say hi to the other faculty that'll be coming, and so the other students, and let's connect hearts together.
Let me strongly encourage you to be there. It's going to be an amazing time, and right after that, we're going to be in the midst of day and night services for the purpose of revival and encountering God. I would love to see you. I know the other faculty and leaders, we would love to see you. And we'll be able to spend time before that meeting, after that meeting. If you're there in the days that follow, we'll be able to connect. If you're struggling, we want to be able to pray with you. Yeah. If you've got testimony, we want to hear it. But listen, this may never happen like this again, especially in Pensacola. So I'm going to be there. Let's be there together. This might be something that unleashes a glorious, holy, new surge of hope and vision and destiny for your life. So I can't wait to see you there.
Wow. Well, Dr. Brown, thank you so much for being with us. It's such a privilege to come and just dialogue and talk about your heart for revival and for the students and what was birthed there. It's forever in my heart. Like, I was changed because of the school. And so thank you so much for being with us.
Our joy.